it's a pretty straight-ahead story. I got some pictures I want to show you. Manchester Craftsmen's Guild's the arts program I started before most of you were born, I think. 1968, during the riots on the north side. And a public school teacher saved my life, a guy named Frank Ross, good man. And I got pretty good at clay, and he hounded me during my senior year and said, I'm leaving here to take a job at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. I don't want you down on the streets like your buddies, or going to the penitentiary. You got to go to college. So Frank hounded me during my senior year, and mainly to get him off my back, I filled out a college application at the University of Pittsburgh. Sent the thing in pencil, man, on an envelope, thinking that'd be the end of it. Well, they sent me back this letter that says you got to pass the Scholastic Aptitude Test to get in here. Well, I'd never seen the Scholastic Aptitude Test. It was back then, it was multiple choice. So I kind of marked up the thing, flunked the test. So I got a letter from Pitt saying, we'll let you in on probation. And so I ended up in Pitt on probation, almost flunked out the first term. Second term, I was on the dean's list. Well, I graduated with honors from Pitt, and now I'm a trustee at the University of Pittsburgh. I actually sit on the board of the school that let me in on probation. And I was the commencement speaker, and I got up in front of 13,000 people, and I said, don't give up on the poor kids, they might end up being the commencement speaker. And that's what I'm going to talk about for a few minutes. I think that people are born into the world as assets, not liabilities. It's really all in the way you treat people that drives behavior. And if Mr. Ross had not ignored the fact I was a black kid from Manchester in the inner city, etc., I'm another one of those guys that's just kind of wandering the streets. Frank didn't care about that. What he cared about was I showed up in the classroom. And I got pretty good at clay. Unfortunately, I cut all my other classes because I was so enthusiastic about clay. I didn't want to do anything else. But I was smart enough to give the teachers whose classes I was cutting the pottery I made. And I got that, they gave me passing grades, that's how I got out of the place. And that's a true story, by the way. Also, later on, I took over something called Bidwell Cultural and Training Center in 1972 during the riots. And guys were getting shot in the streets, and these people that had built Bidwell were looking for some fool to take it over. They said, well, there's that nutty artist, Bill Strickland, up the street. He thinks he's Moses. He'd probably take the job. Back then, I actually did think I was Moses. I could lead all the poor to the promised land, all that. So I took over Bidwell in a funky warehouse. No windows, holes in the floors, holes in the roof. My first day on the job at Bidwell in my Brooks Brothers suit, the guys were on their knees gambling at the front door. And at the end of the first day, I asked Miss Jones, the secretary, I said, Miss Jones, I showed up here today. I didn't recognize the game that the kids were playing. She said, oh, they were taking bets on how long you last in the job. That was the student body. So my first executive act, I bought the beer and I bought the paint. I said, anybody that doesn't show up to paint this building is fired. And one guy didn't show up and I fired him. I said, we ain't living like this, man. If I want to devote my life to this stuff, we're going to start looking like the solution and not the problem and start with this paintbrush. That's important for you guys to understand, to see what I did with it. Because if you don't understand the background, the story doesn't sort of work. It started off in the midst of sorrow and sadness and depression and heartache and disappointment. The people who ran Bidwell stole all the money and left these people for dead. You know, my first day on the job, this white guy shows up with a big old gold badge. He says, I'm looking for the new director of Bidwell. I said, well, that's me. He said, well, son, how long you had the job? I said, basically, it's my first day. He said, well, I hate to ruin your first day, but I'm from the Internal Revenue Service. Your center owes us $300,000 in withholding taxes that my predecessors neglected to pay, which they neglected to mention during the job interview. So I had to raise $300,000, which I did, and paid off the debt and saved the place. So it did not start off as this glamorous, world-class anything. It started in a sea of disappointment. But it's turned into a very interesting story. One of the things that Mr. Ross did, he took us to see a very famous house called Falling Water. Y'all ever heard of it? Well, it was built by this guy named Frank Lloyd Wright, who did okay in the architecture business. And Mr. Ross took a bunch of us black kids to see this place called Falling Water, man. So we're driving down through the woods, and you come out into this clearing, and there's this fabulous house sitting up on a boulder. It had a creek running right down to the middle of the house. And I looked at that and I said, in my neighborhood, we spend time trying to keep the water out of the house. This guy's got a creek running right down to the middle of the place. That's an interesting way of looking at water. The other thing that really fascinated me was the light that enveloped that house. And I said, man, if I can get that light into my neighborhood, I'm halfway home. So I committed myself to building a Frank Lloyd Wright building before I left the planet. I'm going to show it to you because I hired one of his students to build that. This is my concept of what a school for poor people is supposed to look like. This is a school. It's also a training center. And it's in Manchester, which is one of the toughest neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, we have a murder a month on the greater north side. I keep track. Recently, we had a 20-month-old kid was shot on the north side. But they've never been shot in my school. And when you guys come visit, and I hope you do, you won't go through a metal detector because there isn't one. And there are no security cameras. My old high school, Oliver High School, where Linda and I went, is still up there with steel doors, bars in the windows, metal detectors, and sometimes the cops are sitting outside in the K-9 unit in front of the school on a school day. And my building's in the same neighborhood, and we don't have a K-9 unit. And we haven't had an incident in 28 years. Nothing. So there's two possibilities. Bill Strickland's the luckiest guy in Pittsburgh, or there's something about the way in which we like to treat these kids. And I'm telling you, that's the answer to this thing. If you treat people like world-class citizens, they act like world-class citizens. You treat them like prisoners, they act like prisoners. So if the first thing psychologically that you do when you go to school is walk through a metal detector, you're already in the county jail, man, in your head. And you got bars in the windows and K-9 units, forget it. That's not a school, that's a penitentiary. This is a school. And that's the entrance to the building. We have fabulous artwork throughout the building. It's largely my taste. Well, because I raised all the money. I said, when y'all raise the money, we'll put your taste on the wall. But we have quilts and clay and calligraphy, and everywhere I turn, some beautiful looking back at you. The other thing that's really important about this place is it's full of sunlight. Now, Pittsburgh is gray, probably from November to May. But even on a gray day, it's bright. The worst part about being poor is what it does to your spirit. Poor people never have a nice day. They don't even know that the sun's coming up anymore because they stop looking at it. But in this building, they walk in delight, even on a gray day, which means by definition it's very hopeful. That's at Christmas time. This is my concept of what a school's supposed to look like. If you believe in festivals, you ought to have a festival. If you believe in Christmas, you ought to look like you believe in Christmas. So, for all of the holidays, we try to be festive. And so that the students come to a place that celebrates life. And it affects their behavior big time. Big time. It also affects the staff's behavior. Dave Dowley's one of my directors, and he can tell you that the staff and the students have made a bond that everybody's going to be happy in this building. And if they aren't, we figure out why and we solve the problem. So it's worked out okay. The only thing I want you to remember about this little talk this morning, environment drives behavior. Beautiful environments create beautiful people. Prisons create prisoners. If you remember that, I've done my job. That's our boardroom. I commissioned a Japanese cabinet maker to do 60 pieces of furniture for the school. Hired a guy from Kyoto, Japan. In the old days, Bidwell was a building trades program. A friend of mine went to Kyoto, Japan, and married this guy and brought him back to Pittsburgh. And she had heard about the fact that back then we were teaching carpentry and bricklaying and stuff. So she called me up and says, my husband's a woodworker, and I was wondering if you'd give him a job. I said, well, bring the guy over. I'll talk to him. Well, he didn't speak any English. You can imagine how much Japanese I speak. But he had studied with a guy named George Nakashima. And I was hip to Nakashima. one of the great Japanese-American woodworkers in the world. And I knew about Nakashima. I said, well, if you tell your husband, I'm going to give him a job. And she did in Japanese. He stood up and he bowed. And he said, please tell Mr. Strickland I'm grateful for the job, but I apologize that my English is so poor. I said, well, tell your husband the students he's going to work with don't speak English either, so they ought to get along fine. And I hired the guy, and he did 60 pieces of furniture for our school. That's black walnut. That's our board table. And his stuff's all throughout the building. He's also back in the back of our industrial park doing pretty good for himself. We just commissioned him to do another couple of pieces for our 3D imaging center. But this guy's off and running, man. I have heard it sometimes takes up to a year to get a piece of furniture from this guy because he's so busy, which is cool. That's our kitchen. I promote Heinz ketchup wherever I go in the world, which I hope y'all eat. I don't know where your politics are about ketchup, but I stand with ketchup. In the old days, before I got real sophisticated, I had a cardboard box built at a school and in a garbage bag. So I'm dragging this bag all over Pittsburgh. I look like a homeless guy. And I got called into the office of United States Senator John Heinz, who's the heir to the Heinz ketchup fortune, which was like going to see the Wizard of Oz, because he had about 600 million and I had about 60 cents. And he said, man, you're doing a great job with the black folks and the at-risk kids and the ex-steel workers, and we understand you want to build a new school. I said, yeah, I do. He said, well, you could really help the Heinz Company's affirmative action goals out if you'd add a culinary program in a new school when you get it built. That way we could hire some black folks and solve the problem. Well, we weren't into the culinary thing. We were into building trades. I said, Senator, I'm reluctant to go into something I don't know anything about. Give me the money, we'll build the school, I'll come back in a couple of years. We'll get that culinary program going just like you asked. He said, well, what would your answer be if I said I'd give you $1 million? I said, Senator, it appears that we're going into the food training business. And John did give me $1 million, but that's importantly, he allowed me to head of research for the Heinz Ketchup Company. Byron Barty. And we designed a curriculum for poor folks to teach them how to become gourmet cooks. Built an amphitheater. Now, we lost John to a plane accident. I believe that he would have been handing the keys to the White House to President-elect Obama. We lost the President of the United States. He was a good guy. I loved him very much. And I mention him in every speech I give all over the world. That's our pastry department. That's lunch at the school. This is our concept of how to feed people. The students get a gourmet lunch, basically. We have a varied menu. It's fabulous. They like the food. It's good for their stomachs and better for their heads. I wanted to take the stigma out of food. Good food's for everybody on the planet, not just rich kids. And if people tell you that you can't serve gourmet food to poor people, send them to Manchester Bidwell. We've been doing it for almost 30 years. You just have to want to do it bad enough. So the question is, why can't we serve this to the kids in the public school system? And nobody has given me an acceptable reason why you can't do it, except that they ain't trying very hard. If I can figure this out with a bachelor's degree in history from the University of Pittsburgh, and I figured out how to serve gourmet food, why can't the school system serve gourmet food? Nobody has given me a good reason, except they haven't done it. This is being presented by people on public assistance who supposedly know nothing about quality, sophistication, or design. Well, that's what they're doing after 6 months in our center. So what we've discovered, and you can quote me, the only thing wrong with poor people from what we can determine is they don't have any money, which happens to be a curable condition. It's all in the way you think about people that drives behavior. So if you start off with the assumption that people can learn, they learn. If you start off with the assumption they can do world-class things, guess what? They do world-class things every day of the week. I've been running this place for 28 years in this building, and it's been at this level of performance almost from the beginning. That's dessert. So one of the cool parts of working at this place is you eat pretty good. And that's one of our guys. That's Chef Keith. He teaches production cooking. Marriott takes a lot of our people. In fact, one of our students who started with culinary became basically a manager, division manager for Marriott. And she hosted several classes of culinary students at Marriott and then came back to thank us for basically saving her life right before she retired. So we've got some extraordinary stories out here in the environment. That's our dining room. We do a fair number of black tie, pretty high-end events at our school, Medical Association, Engineer Society, and so forth. We call it cross-marketing. One of my goals in life is to change the picture that comes into your head to that picture about the inner city. We train pharmacy techs for the pharmacy industry. We've got guys with no background in pharmacy and no background in science, learning pharmaceutical applications in about 8 months. Those guys and those folks. This guy is working for Alcosan, the Water Treatment Authority, and he started, I think he was down to his last unemployment check when he signed up. And he's making about $50,000 a year now with full benefits, working for the Water Treatment Authority as a chemical analyst. The guy was basically on welfare. He didn't have any background in science, but he performed brilliantly. He's in the Honor Society, he's got a job, case closed. Look at the equations on the board. These are all people who supposedly can't learn technology. Well, if that's true, where'd the equations come from? We're not making this stuff up. It's real. You come over to school and see it for yourself. So we now know that all these people considered liabilities are actually assets in disguise. So what we can do is take all these people on public assistance and we can put them to work, man. We can do it in Pittsburgh and we can do it across the United States. As far as I'm concerned, we can do it across the world. These are our medical coders. These guys. This is our library, more of our handcrafted furniture. Unfortunately, I've had students in this library with high school diplomas that they can't read. One of them, I've got several of them, who can't write a paragraph on any subject, not even their own life, and they graduate from high school. That's unacceptable. If they can't write a paragraph and read a diploma at our center, I don't sign the diploma. But they all read and they all do fine. Thank you very much. So we now know that we can solve this problem. This is the arts program. Remember I'm the black guy from the 60s? How many of you were even alive in the 60s? Raise your hand. Well, that's cool. One time nobody raised their hand. So I got to check out who I'm talking to, or the jokes don't work. Well, I was around during the disturbances. Back then we called them what they were riots. And guys were getting shot, and I wanted to help out, man. So the bishop of the Episcopal Diocese, his name was Robert Appleyard, liked me. And he used to give me checks out of the bishop's discretionary fund, and that's how Manchester Craftsmen's Guild got started. Some of you, I know Linda knows who I'm going to talk about next, a fellow named Tom Cox. Does that name anything to you guys? He was deputy mayor under Tom Murphy. Well, Cox was an Episcopal priest who happened to run Emmanuel Episcopal Church on the north side. He used to drive around in his little green Porsche. And he and I became friends. And he knew the bishop because Cox roomed with John Hines at Yale. So Cox hooks me up with the bishop likes me, he gives me a bunch of checks out of the bishop's discretionary fund. That's how Manchester Craftsmen's Guild got started. It was started by a white Episcopal bishop who mentored and basically adopted this black kid who wanted to teach pottery to everybody. So it's really kind of an interesting story. And I spoke at the bishop's memorial service. He died a number of years ago, and his family asked me to speak at the service. And I got up to speak, and his wife took my hand. She said, I want you to know that the bishop cried like a baby when he saw your name in the New York Times with your first presidential appointment. I've had 3 presidential appointments. Bush 41, Bush 43, and the current President Barack Obama, the kid who got in the pit on probation. Don't judge the book by the cover. You never know in what form your next leader's going to show up. So we work with kids from the public school system. We have 500 kids, grades 8 through 12. Dave Dowey runs the place. And he actually took courses there when he was in high school. I would not characterize Dave as troubled. I characterized him as a leader who got really interested in clay, not for the same reasons that a lot of the kids we get come. A lot of those kids come because they're down to their last prayer, and they've heard from their friends, this is a pretty cool place. Dave is an engineer by background. He came there because he heard there was free clay. And he was right. It is free clay. And he's turned out to be the director of the place. So we're very grateful to have Dave running this thing. And I'm very honored to be able to claim 3 PhDs that I know have come through the program. 2 of which I know personally, well, 3 technically. And we've got a lot of guys who've turned their lives around through the arts. We graduated 99% of the kids from the public school system last year. We basically doubled the graduation rate for the public school kids who come to us. Why? Nothing wrong with the kids. There's something wrong with the school system in terms of the way they're treating them. Now, I want you to be very clear about something. I am for public education. Remember, I'm a public school kid? Mr. Ross would turn over in his grave if he thought I'd turn my back on public schools. I'm not turning my back on public schools. What I'm trying to get them to do is their job, and to step up and to cut this foolishness and get down to running these places like we're for real. Even if I have to build them myself and force everybody into doing it the right way, whatever works is the answer to that. But over the course of time, I think if I keep telling this story, we're going to get enough people agitated, we're actually going to change the way we do business. That's the theory. To keep showing these slides over and over and over till we decide we're going to do the right thing. Then we can get something done. This is Clay. This kid's going to Penn State, I think. He's going to Penn State. Is that right? Yeah, he's a Penn State guy. His brother's already there. He went through our place. This is kids' work. These are all the kids who supposedly don't have any ability, remember. It's a mosaic project the kids did. Look at that young man's eyes. That's a kid that's engaged in learning something. He's at our place, which is voluntary, by the way. You have to get on the school bus to come there. Look at his eyes. When I go to schools these days, the first thing I do is look at the kids' eyes. Most of the time they're looking out the window or at each other, but they ain't looking at a book. At our place, they're looking at the book. That's one of our faculty on the left. That's one of our guys. And this is photography. If you claim to be a Pittsburgh and don't know where this is, you flunked the course. This is a very important Pittsburgh institution where I've spent probably too many days eating hot dogs and drinking beer. But it's a cool place, so I highly recommend Wiener World be a part of your vocabulary. This kid that took that picture is working for Walt Disney Studios. This is the gallery for the kids and the staff. We have staff shows, we have children's shows. In the same gallery, we market them exactly the same. And a number of years ago, probably before Dave's time, we do all these shows. You know, the kids would really bust their butts to do a great show. Museum quality invitation, smoked salmon at the art openings. And now the parents would show up. So the kids started to tear up. I saw a lot of them. One kid asked me to be his parent that evening, for example. And I got tired of watching these kids tear up. So I hired a guy that got off into saving souls for Jesus. You know, dragging guys out of bars with the Bible and all that stuff. I said, I want you to come work for me. Tone down the Jesus stuff to keep the enthusiasm. I can't get the parents to come. He said, I'll get them to come. So he took the keys to the van. Miss Jones, I knew you wanted to come to your kid's art opening, but you probably didn't have a ride. So I came to give you a ride. 15 parents, 20 parents. The last show, how many parents?
We had 120 people total, so yeah, half of the parents.
Yeah. And we didn't pick up one parent. Now it's not cool to show up to support your kids. It's Manchester Craftsman's Guild, where people think you're a lousy parent. So we got that problem figured out. I have seen crowds of 300 people show up for this stuff. On the left is the instructor, on the right is the student. On the left is Jermaine Watkins. I had this kid in 7th grade, and now he's the director of photography for Manchester Craftsmen's Guild. In fact, we had 5 or 6, maybe 7 of our faculty are former students who went through the place, or back teaching as faculty. This is an old slide for all you technology guys, don't cringe. I know how old this is. I keep it in here for a reason. In the old days, I got called out to a place called the Silicon Valley. And in the old days, I didn't have one of these little fancy thumb drive things. I had slides in a box with duct tape on the corner and a slide projector. Do any of you remember them? Well, I had one. And I showed up at the Silicon Valley with my slide projector. And these people looked at me like I was from Pluto, man. Well, that's cool. I blew off the dust, plugged in my little slide projector, and got and told my story. And the lady came out and she said, man, that was quite a story. My only challenge is that your computers are getting a little dated. I said, that's cool. What do you do for a living? She said, oh, I help run a company called Hewlett Packard. I said, well, my dear, there's an instantaneous solution to this problem. And long and short of it, we got close to $750,000 from HP. When you consider the space, the furniture, the computers, and the technology, it's probably $750,000. And it's turned out to be very cool. We've had kids get into Rhode Island School of Design. We've had kids at, Chicago Art Institute, Pratt, Savannah Art Institute. Now, the goal is not to train artists. The goal is to use the arts as a strategy to educate the kids. You can't teach kids algebra if they don't want to live. The first thing you got to do is to get them to stay on the planet. And the arts does it because it appeals to the hemisphere of the brain where the human imagination lies. You unlock the imagination, you unlock learning, you unlock performance. That's what I figured out. And that's what we do with these children. So we got the lady gave us the money from HP, and we built this fabulous computer imaging center. But I keep this slide in here for nostalgia reasons, and you never know when an Apple representative might be in the audience. This is what we built. This is called a classroom. This is how you're supposed to treat your kids. You build that, you solve your problem. We built a music hall while I was at it. A fellow named Dizzy Gillespie showed up. I said, why'd you come to this black run thing in the middle of the city? He said, Billy Taylor told me a black guy built this thing. I didn't believe him. I wanted to see for myself. You ought to build one of these in every city in this country, and I'm going to help you do it. So he allowed us to record his concert. He gave us the rights to the music. And then Herbie Hancock showed up, and he said, man, Dizzy's talking about you, and now I know why. This is big time, man. And then the Count Basie Orchestra, and Shirley Horn, and Betty Carter, Nancy Wilson, Pat Metheny, all of them. 600 recordings, 6 Grammys. We're the hot young jazz label in the United States of America, in the middle of a tough neighborhood in the middle of the inner city. We have a Grammy award-winning jazz label, and it's worked out fine. Look at the children. We bring them from the public school system during the day. That's how they look. That's supposed to be how they look when they go to their schools every day. If they're not, you're not teaching them anything. So why can't school be a celebratory experience for the children? No one has given me a reason why kids have got to be despondent when they go to their school. My daughter goes to the Ellis School down the street. She cries when she can't go to school. These kids cry when they have to go to school. It's upside down, man. They ain't despondent when they come to our place. The place is full of sunlight, food, and hope, and music, and the kids love it. So part of my goal in life is to change the way we do business in these schools so that the kids can come in and celebrate the place. By the way, the metal detectors don't deter crime, just in case you thought they did. A couple years ago, they shot the boy in front of Langley School on the steps before the metal detector. What solves the problem is up here, man, not at the barrel of a gun. These are the children. Here's Dizzy. That's Pat Metheny. And that's 5 of the 6 Grammys that we won. That's our 5-point surround sound recording studio. That's opening night. If you'd have dropped a bomb in that room, you'd have killed all the rich people in Pennsylvania. Because they were all sitting there, man. Including my mom and dad, who Linda knows. They're right there. They're both gone now. But they lived long enough to see their kid build a center in the neighborhood and open it up black tie. The next night I had the neighborhood come in. I had the same food and the same music both nights. Because I wanted to establish the principle, you don't have to be wearing a tuxedo to be treated like a world-class citizen. And we solved that problem big time. So all the concerts basically are sold out in subscription 3 weeks after the season's announced in the middle of the north side of Pittsburgh. And we've never had one incident in over 22 years. Nothing. This was burned out during the riots. I had to look at that going to a fancy building. So I had another box building, I built that. That's a medical technology building. And there's the fountain in the courtyard. And we got Citizens Bank in there. And I built a greenhouse. And Drew Matheson was one of my mentors. He managed the Mellon portfolio. And he was one of the guys that Bishop Appleyard connected me to. And we lost Drew, but we haven't lost his memory. So we dedicated the greenhouse to Drew, and it's 40,000 square foot. It's a production and educational facility, and that's what we grow, orchids, among other things. And we've gotten pretty good at it. In fact, if any of you attended the memorial service for Elsie Hillman, those were our orchids. She loved our orchids. So we have become quite distinguished for the quality of our orchid products. Giant Eagle, some specialty Giant Eagles sell them. Most of the high-end florists sell them. And of course, we sell them ourselves. We ain't going to get rich selling flowers, but it generates revenue to help support the center. You see, everything I've showed you today is free. There's no tuition. I raise all the money. And the reason we do, we're working with poor people. Those guys can't afford tuition. So if you want to work with these folks, you got to provide a means for them to be successful. But they know that it's not free. I just don't charge tuition. They got to perform. You got to perform. Because we went to a lot of trouble to give you a free education, quote unquote. You got to do a good job, man. Because if you guys screw up, it will set back this cause years. So I can't allow you to do that. So you got to know what you're doing. It works out fine. We do hydrangeas, and now we're doing poinsettias. And we took first place in the Home and Garden Show last year. We beat out Miracle Grow, all the big guys. Poor folks. #1 at the Convention Center Home and Garden Show. Now I'm down to the end of the talk. When I was out there at the Silicon Valley, this young man came out of the audience and said, "Boy, that's a heck of a talk, man. Tennis shoes, blue jeans, t-shirt." I said, "Cool, man. What are you into?" He said, "So I built a company called eBay." I said, "Oh, great. You got a card?" I didn't know eBay from that bottle of water, man. So I put the kid's card in my pocket, went back to Pittsburgh, and asked one of the little techie kids. I said, "Have you ever heard of something called eBay?" He said, "Yeah, Mr. Strickland, that's the Electronic Commerce Network." I said, "Holy smokes, I met the guy that built the company." So I called him up. I said, "Mr. Skull, I've come to have a much deeper appreciation of who you are, man." He said, "I thought you'd figure it out sooner or later." Here's $500,000. I said, "What's that for?" He says, "Your first replication." Dizzy was right. I think you can scale this thing. So Jeff and I have become pretty good friends, very close friends. And we have 8 centers now open and operating. We don't own the centers, don't want to own the center. I want to get them built. And we're all affiliated with each other. And so far, so good. Charo is working with us in London. We're going to build one in London. She's doing some work with our center here this week. So this is San Fran before it was fixed up. There's Mr. eBay, Jeff Skoll, Billy Wong and the kids doing video and digital imaging. There's the space. Every space is beautiful that we build or we will not build it. No used furniture, no used equipment. That's not our value proposition. It has got to be good or don't bother. Look at the kids. Look at their faces. Those are not losers. Those are winners. Cincinnati cut the dropout rate to 6% in Cincinnati in 24 months. There's the space. Digital imaging, they turned this into a business. This is one we built in Grand Rapids. Jim Welch, one of the heirs of the Steelcase fortune, built this. With Jim Hackett, the chairman of Steelcase, and the DeVos family, Amway. And this is what we built. These are pictures of Dr. King taken during the last 2 years of his life until he was assassinated by Ben Fernandez, who worked at the time for Life magazine. This is the dining facility for the kids. Western Michigan Consider got the dropout rate to 5% in Grand Rapids. These are some of the kids. One of the ways that we now know that the program is taking effect on the kids, they start pulling their pants up. These used to be called welfare moms. They're not welfare mothers. They're pharmaceutical technicians. Welfare is a state of mind, not just an economic condition. These guys are doing fine. They're working for Spectrum Health, DeVos Medical System. They have living wages, and they're able to feed the kids. This is Cleveland, these kids. We saw kids get off the bus for the first time. They walked away because they thought they got off at the wrong stop. They couldn't conceive that something this beautiful was for them. That's how upside down this conversation's gotten. This guy records with Alicia Keys. He developed a recording program. This is the phlebotomy class that was trained there. This is one we built in New Haven. It's open and operating. Looks just like that picture. This is one we opened up in Boston, doing culinary. That's the amphitheater we built for the students. She's one of our graduates, and this is the first class of graduates, 80% of whom had criminal records, by the way. They all went to work, and they ain't into crime. They're going to work. Not for McDonald's. It's legal seafood. It's more the high-end providers. They can make a living wage. We're very proud of them. This is the one we built in Brockway, Pennsylvania. Anybody know where that is? It's 2 hours north of here. Have you all ever heard of Punxsutawney Phil? That's where he lives. And we built a center up there near the Allegheny National Forest for poor white folks. Poor white folks look just like poor black folks. There's no difference. They're poor. But they responded to the program the same. And this is what we built. There's Dave Dowley in the middle there. And Chicago's teed up. Sharon, PA's teed up. Vancouver we're working on. Virgin Islands we're working on. And Siako, Israel. That one is actually underway. I saw a picture last week. We have Jews and Arabs going to school together in Israel today. So while everybody's having State Department visits, we got the Jews and Arabs going to school together. Because I went over there with a team of people, and we sat down and talked to people in their communities where they live. I went to the Jewish kibbutzes and the Arab villages. And I told these guys, I said, look, I went to the kibbutzes and the Arab villages. I got news for you. Kids look exactly the same. They got black hair and black eyes and copper skin. They're just kids, man. They need a center. Well, they got one, and it's thriving. We will officially open in January, but classes are already underway. If we can pull this off, this is the template for the Middle East. I'm going to go to every country in the Middle East and build these things. And New Haven, Boston, Brockway, and Buffalo, these guys are good. We're talking to LA, Laurel Valley, Denver, Tacoma, and Chester, Pennsylvania. And these are cities talking to us about building centers. And these are countries talking to us about building centers, including London. And I have a book out, Go Make the Impossible Possible. You can get it on Amazon. Buy the book. It's big type and it's real short. But every time I sell a book, somebody reads it, it usually generates a visit to the center in Pittsburgh. So the idea is to promote this idea in 200 cities in the world. My goal is to build 200 centers. 100 in the U.S., 100 around the world. We may make it. In the one in Akko, Israel, That's going to generate international press. Because it already got me an appointment with Shimon Peres, who I met with the last time I was there. And he basically said, keep going. You're on the track, keep going. So if Shimon Peres tells you that, you ought to listen. I think we got something here. So we're already talking about scaling this idea globally. We'll continue what we're doing here in the U.S. Hopefully we can do this global strategy, and hopefully we can make enough of a difference in our lifetime to be able to appreciate it. I want these centers now, man. I'm not talking about my kid, I'm talking about me. I'm tired of living like this. That's enough. You know, kids can't be fed decently. They are depressed when they go to school. They graduate and can't read. That's ridiculous. And don't tell me about money, because the school's got plenty of money. It's what they do with it is the issue. My little kid goes to the Ellis School for Girls, and I pay a small fortune to put her there. Cool. You know why she ain't going to public schools? Because I'm not going to have her go through a metal detector and fear for her life. Forget it, man. When the school system becomes the Ellis School for Girls, then we can talk. And nobody can tell me that they can't, because I just built one, man. I just showed it to you. The only difference between my school and the public school is I run the place. But they're both schools working with the same constituency in the same neighborhood. So come on, man. Why are we doing this? And I don't have a PhD in education. I'm lucky to have any degree. But I got a degree in common sense. I can go from A to B in a straight line. And I know how to feed people when they're hungry. So I think we can build these. And I'm counting on people like you guys to help me. I didn't come out here for entertainment. I hope to be able to implant some ideas in your thinking that will stimulate you in your own work, most of which I suspect is probably nonprofit, but also to support what we're doing. And I believe we can get change one person at a time. That's how it gets done. Unfortunately, it's one person at a time. But that's cool. I'm planning to stick around for a while. I hope you are too. So that's it. That's the talk. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have a few.